I bet you thought we'd never make it back from England alive. Well, we're back. Now, of course, we come home to several days of serious filling of orders, back orders, things that need to be addressed before we actually get back to work here. But as soon as I got back, I ran over, gave this guy a big hug and kiss. I'm ready to do the exhaust manifolds. And somewhere on this video, one of the things I want to do, I want to share with you, well, maybe on the next couple of videos, 2-3 videos, I'm going to put little 10-minute segments in of some of the Spitfires we actually did see while we were in England. I pretty much got to touch, sit in, walk around, hug and kiss. Got special tours. Got to see the whole collection at Duxford. Got to go to Al Rabe's very special bookshop, and that's going to be a special segment we'll have on the next couple of tapes. There is just an incredible amount of good things going on in England. And originally the stunt clinic was going to be a kind of a little baby thing, and we were just going to have a little get-together. Well, turned out to be kind of a big thing, a big popular thing, thanks to Elliot Scott. And Elliot's going to be joining us here in the United States in about 8 weeks to go to Brodax. So in the meantime, we're going to be trying to keep up to date with what's going on with him. He's making a little Brodax Cardinal with a full fuselage. And while we were in England, and I really have to thank Elliot and his wife Mandy, Roger Ladd, Paul Winter, John Benzie, all the people, Uwe Degner, that made our visit very, very special and memorable. Well, first thing, let me go to the mail and see what came in the mail. We've got a pile there. It's like Mount Everest over there. The next project is going to be getting these little exhaust manifolds on. They've been drying everywhere away in England. But I want to look at the mail first. First off, the lady at the post office, Lulu, while we were away in England, we were gone more than 2 weeks, she basically took care of the fish, and she left this little diary. Ernie ate really with you, of course, with my handicapped fish. Bert did this, Musty did this. I thought this was just priceless. I'm going to save this for the... Bert has really been quiet, but he ate well. Ernie did this. And we had fish eggs, but we had no baby fish, so Lulu, I want to thank you. Hey, all the fish are alive. Look at this, April 15th, our last day she was here. Anyway, she came into the house, and I thought that, along with the Bert and Ernie, I know John Brodak gets a kick out of Bert and Ernie anyway. Anyway, she sent this little diary, and I'm going to save this. I just think this was really, even on the one of the last days. He was quiet, but he ate, and we had no babies. None of the fish eggs hatched. Now, these are some photos from Ryan now. Now, Ryan's been watching a lot of our videos. And actually, Ryan's been sharing some of his stuff with me. He sent me some stuff from the Strasbourg Railroad. Hey, now look, this is Brodak dope going. Look at he's got the Folgers cans going, just like Wendy. Pro stunt. He's doing the tinfoil method. Now, the only problem I've had with Ryan is when he emails me, and I email him back, the address is wrong. So I don't know if it's my computer. I don't know enough about computers anyway. Now just look. You know how they say kids nowadays, it's hard to get them involved in model aviation? Well, it's a shame, but it's probably true. Now this looks like he's working on his Brodak Oriental, a profile Oriental. Now this looks funny. You know what it looks like he did? If you look at it real close, it looks like he painted the washer and dryer with Brodak dope. I don't think so. Anyway, we're going to see Brian out at the Brodak meet. Brian. That's a real nice paint job. I'm sure his dad George is proud of it. And please, keep the pictures coming. We'll try to get some of these in Stunt News. Looks like you're having a lot of success with Brodak dope. Ryan and his dad George now. Now, head judge at the World Championships, Big Art, Adam Misson, of course, sent me some things before I left for England. I tried to touch base with him to get some ideas as to things I may be able to talk about. Now, he's made this little, I'm going to pass this on to Elliot. This looks like something that, anyway, I'll make some copies for myself. Absolutely good information. And this is from the head judge at the World Championships. I hope they'll pass this on to Pampa, in fact. In fact, anybody that would really like a copy of this, he's got some stuff in here too. Anybody that would want a copy of this, I think you look at your Pamper memberships and just get a hold of Big Art. I'm sure he'd be glad to send it to you. Big Art Adamson. And when we get that video, we started out not really knowing what we were going to do. We're going to get a special video all edited down so it can be in European mode. And we'll obviously pass a copy on to Big Art. We put a lot of flying tips on there, a lot of things that are basic to finishing, and I really hope it's going to help the Europeans. And it was really, I have to really thank Roger Ladd. Boy, was he some kind of special host also, along with Elliot and his wife. It's from James Mills. He's looking at, he laid this out and he's trying to get the Brodak Dope colors to match. And I looked through the color chart to give him an idea. Looks like he's a bit of an artist. Hey. James, I have to tell you, that's a nice paint job. That should look really nice in the air too. Anyway, we hope the Brodak Dope that you're going to use, I hope it's going to come out every bit as good as mine. I've had great luck with it so far. From James Mills. And by the way, this is a great idea. If you're laying out a new paint job, this is a good way to do it. Do it with little artist sketches. If you can do them full size, even better. Looks like he's even got the little Spitfire exhaust going here. And by the way, Ken should have fiberglass wheel pants ready real soon for people looking for fiberglass wheel pants. This is from Giorgino. He checked in with some real nice cockpit detailing here. Check out the cockpit detailing. George, of course, made the pilot that's in the Seafire, and the pilot that was going to go in the Spitfire but just didn't fit. I guess I didn't make the cockpit wide enough or something. Oh, I see. Yeah, he's got this. See, I have all this built in. But anyway, he does a beautiful job. He's a professional modeler, by the way. Anybody would like to inquire about obtaining some of his professional modeling skills? Now check this out. This warms the cockles of my heart. A British, of all things, a British team racer, proto racer. Look, and just having come from the almost exact plane was in Duxford. Got to see this guy and wow. Some of the things that are going on. Appreciate the photos. Okay, this set of photos from Ken Clapson, and Ken, of course, looks like he's really got this finishing thing down pat. I hope he'll be using Brodak Dope on his next project so we can see how. He's got the silver down pat anyway. I sent him up a Brodak color chart. I hope he'll give it a shot. Anyway, this nice set of photos, and I'll pass these on. These are really nice. Nice paintwork, by the way. And Ken's from Canada. And we may even get up to the Canadian Nationals one of these years and videotape them. I don't know if they let Americans compete or not, but it doesn't matter. It would be a great trip. Karen loves... Karen, nothing. I loved. Anyway, love Canada vacations. We've been on 2 last year. Quick photo from Neil Beekman. He's one of the Flushing boys. Nice to see he's getting some nice paintwork finishing on here anyway. Max 35S. I hope we'll get to see you this year out at Flushing. I hope they're going to have a contest out there. I've heard a rumor that they're going to have the contest again. Anyway, let me show you some of the other things. Thanks for the photo, Neil. Show you some of the other things I picked up while I was in England. As I always do, I try to collect everything that relates to warbirds, because P-40, of course, has been one of the planes Joe and I have talked about possibly doing in the future. Anyway, I picked up a lot of books while I was in England. In fact, Karen doesn't know. I put them on a credit card. Wait till the bill comes due. I also picked up a nice mosquito photo. It was the last one they had in the store in England. Anyway, this book, Superbirds, I've got a bunch of them. I'm going to put a couple on each. I'll put this one on this video. Just to give you know, some of these books are just really inspirational. If you're looking to do a face on one of your planes, or the tiger's mouth, shark mouth, whatever you call it, can't beat this book. Just loaded with some of the best photos, and these are really crystal clear, high quality paper. I'm glad we're not monitoring or making a B-29 cockpit. Look at this. Can you imagine all these gauges? This is from Fifi. Again, I just love having the books. Boy, can't tell you how many times I just sit around. I don't watch a lot of television, so the books, they fill a gap normally to people that watch sitcoms. I'd rather read the books than watch any of the junk that's on TV, except, of course, Wings. There's some nice B-17 photos in this, exceptional B-17 photos. Chin turret on a B-17. Well, if you like Invasion Stripes, how's that for a paint job? A B-26 Marauder. Just one great photo after another. Well, speaking of this, there was a, oh, I can't even say. There was a, oh God, I can't remember which museum it was even in. There was a Spitfire that was the exact model that Joe Adamusco had modeled, and I hope I got it on the video when I was with Roger Ladd to Battle of Britain Museum. I hope I got that. In fact, somewhere on this video I'm going to put some of that footage. I can just picture Bandrock and Mike Palco here in The Invader. Who's flying it, Dan? Are you flying it? No, I'm flying it, Mike. No, I'm flying it, Dan. No, I'm flying it, Mike. Well, Dan finished that P-51. The Nats are coming. Brodax is coming. Some nice nose art. Something about B-25s. They always seem to have the coolest paint jobs. There was a B-25 in one of the museums, too. I got video of all this stuff coming up. Nice nose art on these. But who paints this stuff? So I can come and paint one of these girls on my stunt ship. I don't know if Karen would go for that. They had a book in this bookstore in England, this Alroy bookstore, that had about a 3-inch thick book with all the nose art of all the planes from World War II in detail. I didn't have it. Well, I bought all the Spitfire books and Warburg books. Not that I didn't buy it. I'm sorry I didn't. Nice camo fogging in here. Anyway, if you love unusual B-25s, this is a great book. Now I heard that, in fact, when I was at Duxford, one of the sad stories we heard was one of the last flyable P-38s with one of the really accomplished flyers crashed, and the plane was destroyed and the man was killed. The flyer, I didn't get the guy's name, and that takes one of the P-38s forever off the list. I don't know which one it was. But hard to forget that great model, that scale Nats winner that George Gatiss made of Yippee. And the people in District 2 here, they'll never forget George Gatiss. What a wonderful modeler he was. Some of the great P-47 paint jobs, boy. Another model with hundreds of really nice paint jobs. The Univilla Killer.
Doorbells and sleigh bells and wings. You are my favorite thing. White winters and out into springs. These are these things when I'm feeling sad. So
In the museum footage you're going to see on one of the next few tapes, there was two Corsairs in one of the privately owned. One guy owned the whole collection, and he owned two of them. It's mind-boggling enough when a guy can afford one warbird, but this whole collection of warbirds was owned by one person. Can you imagine that? Guess what? It wasn't me. But boy, eat my heart out. Imagine, if you, just think now, one Corsair, would that make your day complete to own one? This is the one that's on the footage coming up. This is the one, 115. Unbelievable. Yeah, there aren't hundreds of these left, so it's very easy to identify them. Again, you gotta admit, that'd be pretty breathtaking. Blows me away. Two Corsairs. The guy actually had about 25 warbirds in this one collection. You gotta see it. Unbelievable. Even now, I'm still thinking about it. Mind-boggling when you think about it. Of course, in that collection, there just was only one Wildcat. Only one flyable Wildcat in the poor guy's collection. What warbird book would be complete without the rare bear? Look at this bear cat. This picture is a nice bear cat, an Alroy bear cat with a Brodak dope finish. As I shouldn't even mention this, but there was a P-63, a King Cobra, in that collection in England. And they had it all stripped down and the engine was sticking out. You'll see it. It's just one of the... I tell you, that trip thing was just unbelievable. My head is still spinning. I'm still thinking about warbirds. P-40s, look at that camo job. Love those camo jobs. Oh, we don't like that too much. In fact, Noel Drimback said he was thinking about doing a P-40. Hey, Noel, get with it. The shark mouth version of the P-40. In the highlights of this book, there's a lot more photos in here. I'm obviously not able to get every one, but just give you an idea of, you invest in a book for inspiration or for the history of aviation, this is a good one. Now, if that doesn't warm your blood, if that doesn't make you want to build one, no, I don't know what would. These nose art things. Porno nose art. Oh, and as if that wasn't enough, there was two Kitty Hawks in that collection. Not one, two. I'd have to have two of everything. Okay, what am I talking about? I have 3 Spitfires. Now, if I was to make a P-40, this would be one of my first choices. Look at that paint job. And it would be prototypical, too. Now, this is flown by a woman. And notice that the shark mouth has lipstick. The nose art on this guy. Flying Tiger. Cool. We are like looking right into the exhaust pipes. Look at this with the tail high. I love the way they paint the wheel covers too. Like a Jim Solhavy, Jerry Sipper, Nobler. This guy's got a little flying tiger on him too. Oh, these nose arts. This guy's got 2 nose arts. make a beautiful. I know Billy Simon's made a stunt model of a P40. Maybe there was other ones. I remember Simon had one. Now Banjock, what you guys should have done is Banjock and Palco should have made one P82 and take turns flying it. That would have been cool. Talk about an unusual stunt model. Nice camo job on this guy. This, by the way, notice the rudder. This is one of the latest model P51s that had an H, that had the extended rudder. Very few of these, in fact, I haven't finished reading the book. Very, very few were made. Nice nose out on this guy. Here's a lineup of Mustangs. Look at the mirror, the rear view mirror. 2 rear view mirrors. Look at this. Inside the museum, and they had one of the griffins ripped apart, and they had the exhaust pipes laying right on the floor. I got to run over, and the guy wasn't looking. I touched one. I don't know what that means. I guess it means I'll go to heaven. But this guy's got the extended rudder too. For a stunt model, that'd really be cool. No doubt about it. When you're doing a P51, there's just an endless choice of paint jobs, invasion stripes, markers, short lettering. Like checkerboards, there's your model. Those are real birds. Boy, it must be nice to have this kind of money. Anyway, we're almost done with the book, just to give you a little inspiration. Never have too much inspiration. Twin cockpit Mustang. This is the one that Karen likes, with Dolly written on the side, so she could buy more dolls. Dolly. We call them Dolly Ochkas. She did buy dolls in England too. She thinks I don't know. Unruly jewelry. There's an idea for you, Dan. A whole checkerboard nose. That's kind of cool. Unruly Banjock, you could call it. Unruly Palco pulling up the rear. Good in the back, the British Mustang. I hope you've enjoyed sharing this little book with us. We've got several more. We'll try to get one on each video. And if this stuff doesn't make your blood boil, I don't know what would. Just an endless supply of ideas, even for use on a straight line stunner. Look at a spinner. It's unusual. There's an idea for you, Dan. And what could be better? P51s with invasion stripes. So if you like the book, there's about 200 other photos in it that I've skipped over. The name of the book is Superbirds. It's put out by Osprey Aerospace. I bought this in that bookstore in England. If you're interested in the book, give these people a call. Believe me, it'll cost you $1 or $2 to call. Give them a credit card number. The book will be in the mail the next day to you. These people are really aviation minded. The best aviation bookshop I've ever seen. It's in London. It's the secret domain of Al Rabe, Frank McMillan, people that are really hardcore semi-scale people.
Now today, also in the mail, I got this from Gary Hajek. This is some kind of a, I don't know who makes this. It's a Russian spinner. Czechoslovakian, Russian, Hungarian, I'm not sure. I've never even had it out of the packet. I had this before I went to England, but I never made the piece. And what I'm going to try to do, it looks like a real nicely made piece. What I'm going to try to do, Ted Winterman and Gary Hajek are both interested in seeing if I can mold a backplate for this spinner. And since I've never seen a spinner, I don't know. Let's take a look at this. Let's see how light this is. Okay, so it's a carbon. What it is, they made a carbon fiber spinner. The cone is very light. Actually, the backplate's not that heavy either. Let's see how that attaches. It attaches on an inside lip, which is a nice way to do it, actually. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the little box, as we always do for the spinner backplates, and mix up some smooth-on rubber. Let's see how this looks, in fact. This looks pretty nice. Anyway, maybe that this is one of the things we're going to try to make in the future. I have Jimmy looking at the possibility of making an all-carbon fiber spinner where the only part will be the tip will be aluminum. Anyway, we'll look at that possibility too. But so right now, the way we've done it in the past is to make a little box, attach this to the bottom, pour molding rubber on top of it like we have on the ones that go in the Aero product spinners that we make 25 of at a time. Let's see how much different this is. Ooh, that might even fit in our Aero products. Let me see if I got one. Now this is the one. This is Gary's. And obviously it's thinner. And it doesn't fit inside the lip, so you're going to have to make a new mold. Well, it wouldn't take much to make a little change on that, though. So this has a lot more material in here. This has less. So I can assume that if I can mold this, but that's a real thin lip, though. Well, we're going to give it a shot. Let's make up the box. It's real close. I wonder if I could even put that on a lathe and take a little material out of there. No. It's easier to just make a new mold. What am I doing? Fooling around. First step, of course, is to CA that right down, get it on nice and solid, and we'll build a box around it. Ready to mix the molding rubber. Now this is the rubber we've been having real good luck with. So far, so good anyway. The most important part in this step is to stir slowly and thoroughly, and after you think you have it mixed, it's a 10-to-1 mix, weigh it with a grain scale. I'm kind of excited. We have 6 different backplates in stock now, and this adds another one. So we have a lot of variety of things for people that want to get that last little bit of weight out of their nose. By the way, that spinner, I don't know whose brand it is, that is really a nicely made piece. It'll be interesting to see if we can mold that effectively. And the trick is to kind of let all the air bubbles settle out of it. And they will come out if you mold this way. But pour it nice and slow always is a good investment in patience anyway. And I really like, see there's an air bubble right there. I like to let all those bubbles rise out of the material, so I'll pour it in layers. And of course any molding rubber we have left over, we'll just make some extra molds for some of the other backplates that we're selling a lot of here. But it looks like we've finally gotten to the point where we can get almost all of these to come out of the mold with as few defects as possible. It just takes time to figure out all the little quirks in any molding job like this. And when this dries up tomorrow, now today, believe it or not, is the day of the year we're going to try, if Mike can get off work, we're going to try to take the cover off the pond and
start getting the water cleaned out. Usually it's so algae infested you can't even see the fish at this time of year. It needs a real thorough clean out. And so we have plenty left over. I'll just make up an extra one of these. These are the ones that are going on the Spitfire, the Aero Products 2 1/4. Again, we got 6 different kinds so far, so the more the merrier. If you have one you need molded up, some special one, we'll try to do it.
And we dress in black.
Then we got 3 out of that batch. You never know how many you're going to get out. When that's dry, we'll be able to give Gary Hajak's back plate a try probably tomorrow. Always good to let that dry 24 hours. Every year this time, Karen and I, one of the things we really look forward to the whole time that we've been together is getting the garden all squared away. We have a lot of, I always like to run a camera through here for a minute. You can see what's happened while we were away at England. The varmints got in at our pond cover. But Mike Kajeski and I, usually we take a whole day, pull all this up, dig up all the rubble, and then we'll start our planting probably next weekend. We don't even know if we have fish in there anymore because there's so much algae. The algae just grows like crazy in there over the winter. But it doesn't hurt the fish at all. It's a real mud puddle, in fact. It's pretty disgusting. But once the falls are running and the filters are running, yeah, this is not my favorite day of the year. And it looks like we're going to have baby woodpeckers over up against the house. I can't believe they're making a nest in there. The mama woodpecker's been going in and out of there all day. Looks like we're certainly not missing a flying day here. The wind is already starting to blow. It's only early in the morning. The leaves are just starting to come on the trees. Beautiful downtown Rutherford, New Jersey. Boy, and after seeing how beautiful the countryside was in England, this time of year in England, the country is all green and clean, and by Roger Ladd's, everything was beautiful. Oops, first flower of the year. And it looks like my little maple. I planted this little maple last year. Looks like he's made it through the winter. Whatever this guy is, he's blooming. Oh, we got our first couple of buds coming out. There's another one over there. It's not even time. My Father's Day maple is doing well, plum maple. Anyway, let's get to work before Kajeski. Now you can see we've spent basically the whole day here cleaning and draining and pruning, and there's still water pumping out. The only reason I say this is there's a lesson here for everybody, and especially a lesson for me. If you have anything in life, like a pond, like a real Spitfire, pets, fish, dogs, wives, kids, there's always a price to pay. And in my case, years ago when I made the pond, I really wanted one. And I went around for a whole year thinking, geez, my friends have ponds, I don't have a pond. Oh, I want a pond. I found out how much work it was, and I said, I don't really know if I want a pond. But every year it takes me 2 or 3 days to do a full clean out, and there's a price to pay. And if you're not willing to pay the price, then the easiest thing is just don't make a pond. But what I see happening in the world of models is you have people that want to have world-class models or world-class flying abilities, but they don't want to pay the price. And I guess the way to look at it is just look at the pond. The next 3 or 4 days, I'm going to be out here slushing and in the pond, scraping algae and cleaning and everything. But I really want it. And when there's something you really want in life, you really just have to learn how to pay the price instead of whimpering and whining. And in my case, it took me a year to learn that. But anyway, the point here, I also wanted a big filter years ago. This is a 5,000-gallon pond. And I didn't have the $1,900 for a 5,000-gallon filter, but I got plans to one, looked at it, and I said, hey, I can build that myself. So here we have the Windy official. It's almost 2 years it's been in operation. And we've got an upgrade this year. Mike Kajeski made me this giant box to cover it up. We're going to paint it white later in the day. I bought some indoor-outdoor paint just for cosmetic reasons. But there's a lesson. And boy, you think everything you have to know about model planes comes from airfoils or from motors or fuel or glow plugs. It isn't. Sometimes it's the work ethic or the really wanting to have it. And in this case, now you look around here right now, what a mess this is. Look at there's a fish coming up to the top over there. On a day like today, not many people want to have a pond. But you know what? When this is all cleaned up and Karen's out there cooking the grill and we're playing Spitfire videos, then everybody wants one. So I hope that little lesson, it's a lesson I've learned in life, and I think it really does apply to all of model aviation. When you really want something, be willing to pay the price and there's guarantee that you get it.
Now, I want to mention this I thought was a really significant thing that just happened. Mike was over here, he left the box off, and he returned an engine to me. This is the original engine from his plane. But this is a way to resolve an engine problem. Now, he originally had a double star 40 in his own plane, and if you go back on the videos, you'll see he made a big cheek cowl, and he did all kind of other things to that plane. Never really got rid of the vibration problem to his satisfaction. But there's always a good way to test, and you can eliminate if it's the airplane or the motor. And the way you do that is, we know, for instance, that this motor ran in this plane for a whole season, pretty much without even fooling with the needle valve. And 8 or 10 or maybe 20 people have flown it, used it, had fun with it. So we kind of had a feeling that we know this motor is good. This one is not a problem. Now, what I suggested he do is, while I was away in England visiting Elliot and Roger, I said, take the plane, and if all else fails, take the motor out of my plane, put it in your plane, and if it vibrates, put the same prop and spinner. See, it's the same everything, needle valve, everything. If it vibrates then, you know it isn't the motor. So what he did, he went out with his daughter flying for a day. The original motor it was in, it was just shaking and vibrating. Took my motor out of the plane, put it in there, exactly the same thing. So now what it tells you is it's not the motor. Rather than sending a motor back to whomever or frustrating yourself, it's a good way of diagnosing if it's the motor or the airplane. Of course, it's a good idea to do that if you can with tanks too. If you have a tank and you think that tank isn't running right, you can take one out of a friend's plane, or another, in our case, we just take one out of another Spitfire. It helps you diagnose the problem. So now at least we know one thing is for sure, that the plane itself is causing the vibration problem. It isn't an out-of-balance prop or a spinner or something wrong with the engine. So what I'm suggesting Mike do, and I don't know if he's going to do it today because he had a window job to do, is basically take the cheek cowl. We made 2 different cheek cowls for this plane. I'm getting sick of making cheek cowls. But make one that's even bigger and more solid, similar to what Carlos Serra did, in a triangle shape. Now you notice on this plane, this little piece here, even though you might think, oh, that's just a cosmetic little thing. No, it isn't. Another thing, too, look around. In fact, I'll show this on a close-up. This plane has had a lot of flights on it. A lot of different people. If this area present even the slightest crack in it, you know you're in trouble. You know that can never, ever get better. It's a problem. That crack isn't going to go away by itself. So what I'm suggesting is, if you see a crack there, you know something in this area has to be made stronger. So the purpose of all this is just to give you an idea of how to diagnose a problem in a very simple way. Now, obviously, I'm going to put the motor back. We have our first contest of the year coming up Sunday. It's an all-profile contest. I probably am not going to fly because I want to finish the work in the yard and the pond and catch up from my trip to England. But one of the things for sure is somebody there will want to fly the plane, either Mike or Jimmy or somebody. So we'll get the plane out in somebody's hands, and maybe even if we do have time, shoot an hour or so of video. Now, after a year of flying this plane, and I mean this plane has had some really intense flying sessions with a variety of skill level of pilots, some of the things I find are really, really significant. Number 1, I really love how the double star engine runs. That is really a nice little engine. Number 2, the air epoxy fillets held up, and this is not a crack anywhere that's significant. Back here, I don't even count that because I have a notch where the horn is a little tiny crack there. I don't think that would even happen if I didn't have that horn there. I look over the whole finish, and because we're going to start a new season here soon, I like to see any spots that need to be touched up. Since so many people have borrowed and flown the plane, Mike is one of the better ones. Some of them just return it with the oil still on it. But we accomplished something last year with this plane that I'm real proud of, is to make a fully aerobatic competition plane that was very, very easy to build, very economical to build, and served a lot of purposes. It served as a test bed for testing engines.
The kits are now available, of course, and from what I've heard from John Brodak, they're a really good seller, so I hope we're going to see a lot of them in the year to come. This was, as I look back about this time last year, this has been just the most fun of projects to work on. And I'm so happy to see Elliott Scott is building the same plane, but with a full fuselage, and I believe there's one of the gentlemen in England is going to build one too. The plans are finalized. If anybody would like a copy of those, it's just fuselage drawings. You need to buy a kit or a set of laser ribs, and then you can basically from Elliott's plans work off and build an accurate fuselage. So we're looking forward to even seeing that, and when Elliott's here in the States in about 8 weeks, we hope we're going to have a chance to help him trim that out, get it sorted out. We just, again, boy, when I think of the trip with Roger Ladd and with Elliott and all of the Spitfires in England, it just blows my mind. Speaking of lower planes, this is one that's been around. This is a 12-year-old plane here, the Red Baron. And we're going to try to set that up for Elliott Scott to bring back to England. I've mentioned that before, but we'd like to leave a plane in England. And certainly everybody in England is entitled to or can have some fun flying it. And if you guys crash it, you'll be a real Spitfire. Anyway, I like the idea, and it's my own personal thing, that many of the models, I think we have 8 or 9 now, that we've given away to people. You can figure it out. I don't have a lot more room to store them here. And I don't want to build a museum. You know, that thing in England gave me real thought. You know, when they take a Spitfire and put it up as a gate guardian, and it just sits there like a limp cabbage. I don't know. I like to see them flying. And as many flights as they have left in them, good, bad, or indifferent. And we hope now the Red Baron will be one of the planes that continues that tradition. These planes, it takes so many hours to build them, and I hate to just see them rot away. Fly them like old soldiers. They're supposed to get killed on the battlefield. So it's up to you, Elliott. Make sure you're wearing a bullet. Now, the other significant thing is now we have subscribers. Elliott's going to take care of them outside the country and be able to make all of the videos, any video you need in PAL mode. So that's just another expansion of things that we're able to do with the videos. This is one of the tips I know everybody out there, especially in England, they're looking to save money, and I don't blame them. Anyway, I had to buy this. I was using a compressor before, and anybody that knows duct tape isn't going to hold any pressure, but one of the things I went and I priced out a new 50-foot hose, and it was a lot of pounds. And so rather than buying a new hose, I had this real inexpensive kit that you can put a splice in. Now obviously what I'll do, and the only reason I'm putting this on the videos, everybody that would be watching the videos would at some point in time have a time to replace the hose. Well, you really don't have to replace it as long as you can put one of these little splice guys in. I'll just cut out the bad section of the hose, put the splice in, and hopefully get back to working today. Now what I've been doing is just doing a little final sanding on these. I want to make a little lip. I'm going to get some 5-minute epoxy with some black dye in it. And just very carefully get that angle in there. Get them lined up one at a time. But I made 3 extra ones. You can tell I'm real confident. I did have these break off on one of the original, I think on the Seafire. And I think it's from grabbing up here when you pick up the model. But I want to have some spares, of course. And it's a good idea to always make spares when you have these kind of little parts. Alright, so I want to mix up some epoxy. I've got this laying in this position, so it could be laying here, and I can kind of fine tune these for the last few seconds before the epoxy kicks off. Always a good idea to have a little bit of black dye in the epoxy. This way if some does show through, or you have a little drool of it somewhere, it won't be as conspicuous as if it's a different color or if it's clear even. Try to get a good glob in there so it'll tend to make a fillet on the inside when it starts to dry. Off just to make sure I have a good enough, see I'm missing a bond in the back so I know I can get in there, clean up. So I have a complete bond on the whole piece when I put this down. And I'm just babysitting these while it dries up. And I'm gonna, once it sets up, I did one at a time, it was easier. Now I gotta take a Q-tip. What I think I'm gonna do is turn the model on its nose, take a Q-tip and run some epoxy down inside here to make the equivalent of a little fillet. Once that's hardened up, and once I know they're on nice and straight, just gonna babysit this. Now with a separate batch, and what I'm trying to do, yep, my Q-tip's falling apart. Trying to do, the original bond is almost hard now. And what I'm trying to do is get down in here with a Q-tip, kind of let some glue form along the inside, make a little radius. Again, these things, a little detail like this, it sounds like it's real easy till you try to do it. And then the ultimate thing is you have to line them up. If they're crooked in any dimension, it's going to stand out like a sore thumb, since it's a focal point of the model. And just kind of let that roll in there. I'm going to just touch and hit this with a hairdryer so that it tends to warm that up. It's the heat that'll let that go right in there, I hope. Famous last words. Now it's just a question of repeating it on the other side. Of course, I'm making sure I'll turn the airplane in this dimension so the epoxy's always dripping down into the manifolds. I'm going to let these dry overnight. The next step on this, I'm going to sand these with 1200. And I realize, well, it might have been easier to sand them and buff them out while they were individual, but I just was afraid that, well, with 6 of one, half a dozen of another, I was thinking if I get that area down in there, some grooms or something on it, it would be a problem. I'd rather have the solid epoxy joint. I didn't want to take any chance on getting a bad joint here, since these really are delicate. But they really do add a lot to the model. I kind of like the way they look. Anyway, tomorrow we have to figure out the tank venting. I'll let these dry overnight. Tomorrow I'll buff them out. Get the tank venting sorted out. We're closing in on being ready to, well, we gotta make landing gears yet. I don't know, I'm hoping we're only about a week, maybe less, away from flying. I got my spare with these little guys. Spare exhaust, they'll go in the touch-up kit. Always have a couple extra spares. Always have an extra tub of this stuff in the touch-up kit also. Alright, time to quit. Come back to this tomorrow. Morning, what I want to do, I don't know if this is really going to work. I started taking some 1200 sandpaper. Again, I was really nervous about the idea because I had one of these come off the Spitfire, and it took me about 2 hours to find it up at the club field. So I really wanted to keep that surface as clean as possible, and I thought, well, this will hold it in place while I'm doing it, and if it is weak, it'll fall off and I can re-glue it right here in the shop without having to lose it. So maybe that theory isn't working out as well as I wanted, though. Anyway, it takes a little bit of M600, and then I'll be able to buff this out. Then I want to start on a tank venting, and a tank venting is, that's one of the things I get a lot of calls on a regular basis, is how do I set up the tanks. the typical all-tube forward venting system that I don't know who really gets the credit for it. We started using it and probably somebody used it before us, so I won't say who the original one was, but it's an excellent way of doing it, that's for sure. And the idea with these exhausts was to make them look like rusted metal anyway, kind of rough and rusted. Now, one of the things I didn't anticipate was I went through in a couple of spots, so there were some high spots. So I'm going to retouch these up after I put the tank venting in. What I want to do, tank venting is such a critical thing, and again, that's one of the things I get calls on all the time. I want to do a little storyboard on tank venting, maybe a big help. Now, this may seem like a real simple story, a simple topic, but it really isn't. And I want to go through how the system I use has evolved. One of the things in the early 50s when I made my first Noblers and Thunderbirds, and we all know back then, what happened was you had a tank, pretty much, if I'm remembering correctly, this vent would be a piece of tubing that was soldered right to the tank, and I could be wrong, this one even went forward. I'm trying to go back to the first Nobles I made, and you had a pickup tube. This whole assembly was glued in and became part of the structure of the airplane, and that was an excellent thing. The only downside to this whole system, there was a downside. If the tank rusted or rotted out or leaked, you had a problem. And what would happen is you had to cut it out, and that, boy, became a rather big, especially with the vent in the top of the fuselage. So I don't know. This is the old nostalgic way of doing things, and I certainly, if you choose to do this way, just be aware that that's one of the downsides of it. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to do things. Now, in my experience, the planes that I'm building I like to last indefinitely, 10, 12, 15 years minimum, Red Baron, tradition. So I want to replace that tank for several reasons. I want to be able to replace it with either bigger or smaller. Now, it's the same thing as being able to take the engine out. I may want to put a different engine in. Well, I want to be able to replace it. In the case of a tank, I want to have it bigger or smaller. I also want to have two choices of uniflow or no uniflow, depending on how I want to set the engine up. I also want to have two choices, running on pressure or no pressure. So what it is to do this, I need to obviously have a removable tank. To have a removable tank, one of the things that years ago, and I don't remember when, it probably was in the 70s or 80s, people came up with the traditional tank, and what they would do is, I remember seeing Jim Casal for one, they would solder the vents right to the side of the tube. Remember John DeTavio had a couple of these where the vents were soldered right to the tank. And with mixed results of sometimes this cracking and breaking. Harold Price probably was a contender to win one of the Nationals when his tank vents broke. This again is old technology. This is the kind of things that if you do make a tank with the vents soldered right to the tank, there's resonant vibration in the airframe. It's going to transfer down, and this vent is going to act like a tuning fork. And eventually, even if you use Stay Bright silver solder, you can tend to tear the metal away, or that'll fail in service. And that's one of the things. These are the things that years ago were very, very difficult to cope with. Now, the system that, and I don't take credit for this system, I've just used it. It's evolved through many people. The biggest of one is Big Jim, who did all the tanks years ago. And we came up with what I think is a little bit better system. Again, I'm not sure that Big Jim is the first one to ever invent this, but certainly he made tanks for me this way in the early 80s, and they were absolutely dead reliable. Now, several people make tanks now, and I could be wrong. I think John Brodak now has the dies for all the Taffender tanks, so I would hope this is going to be one of his good-selling tanks where all the vents come out the front. We call this an all-tube forward tank. Look, I can't even spell. All tube forward. Anyway, the object of this is then you would connect these, once this tank is inserted in the plane with various tubes, and it doesn't matter where these go, these would be soft rubber tubing, so it transmits none of the vibration back to the tank. And you could then put a hard vent in the airplane, or however you wanted to vent them, and I'm going to draw that out accurately soon, an overflow vent. And you can just connect these with random pieces of soft tubing. So none of that vibration, that's a pretty nice drawing, I know you're impressed. The idea is that none of this is connected hard to the tank. Now, just as a thought, on a typical Cardinal, you would have one piece of tubing connected from the Uniflow vent in one case. This would be just one way to set it up. You would also have the overflow. Again, these are connected with soft tubing. And of course the pickup leading right to the motor. Now, the idea is I always like to be able to shim the tank up and down, and that's always a critical part of getting any motor to run right, is to have all the variation. I've had tanks with baffles in the back, baffles on the side. Again, you get different characteristics, and you need to identify what you want to do before you can make those characteristics work in your favor. But certainly the most important thing in my book is that these are connected with soft tubing, not hard onto the side of the tank. This is a critical thing in getting a bulletproof, reliable system. You know, one of the things that I like to be able to do is always have the option of running a Uniflow tank. Now, if you decide you'd rather run what amounts to be a box tank, and box tanks can be made to work very well, no doubt about it, but I would like to have this choice. This, of course, is going up. Now, what this setup would be a typical normal Uniflow. Air pressure is going to enter this vent and somewhat stabilize the motor run. Now, a Uniflow system tends to be very stable. The time from the beginning of the flight to the end of the flight, the lap times tend to be very stable. The motor run can be somewhat muted with this system. But you also have a choice now. With this setup, you can just simply reverse the tubes and run the Uniflow pipe. After the plane is filled, just reverse the vents. So that this now, and it's always a good idea if you're going to want to try that, to face that vent into the air, you can even just reverse cap this vent off. Once this is over, tank is filled and overflowed, you can just do it with a cap vent. You don't even need to change the tubing. But then that would give you a box tank. It would be the equivalent of a no Uniflow tank. So you would have two choices. The choices are, with no Uniflow, the plane will tend to speed up a little more at the end of the flight, and it'll have other very subtle characteristics. The motor brake may be more violent. Sometimes with a Tiger 60 it can work to your advantage in the fact that you want to have the overhead 8, various end maneuvers in the pattern, really have that motor honking. So that can work to your advantage. But if you do it this way, and this is the way we're going to try to set this up, you have a lot of choices. You also have another choice. Let's assume you have a muffled motor and you have a pressure fitting. You can now run pressure up to the Uniflow line, and that would stabilize the motor run even more. Muffler pressure stabilizes things. Uniflow tends to mute them. So a Uniflow running on muffler pressure would tend to be, in my estimation, the most stable of all the motor runs, and probably work in your advantage as one of the choices you have. Also, since this engine has the pipe, we want to be able to ultimately have a pipe that we can run pressure on and no pressure. So we have a lot of things we want to build into this plane, but the most important thing is we want to have a lot of choices. Now, if you just happen to take, and let's pretend this is a fuselage side. In fact, let's draw this out. I think this will solve a lot of problems. Fuselage side. Let's pretend the bottom's flat, but it doesn't really matter. And the tank is here. Here's some of the things that I've found that have been a problem for me that I thought I was cute. At one time, I put the pipes both coming out the bottom. In fact, I did this a couple of times before I learned my lesson. And one of the things I did, I said, oh, that's no problem. I'll just run the tubing up inside the fuselage like so. And the advantage was I didn't have to see those, when I wiped the plane off, I didn't have that vent in my way. Well, what this happens is if this starts to siphon, what would happen from time to time, this would just start to siphon, and all of a sudden, you have an empty tank by the time you get the motor started. Boy, the spelling is getting worse by the day here, isn't it? Anyway, an advantage, real good advantage would be, if you put the vent, let's make an imaginary line, and put the Uniflow vent just higher than this. Now, it doesn't really matter if it goes up here. Mike Rogers always put them up there. But it should be above the tank, and then that totally eliminates, or should totally eliminate, siphoning. You should have no chance it's going to siphon now at all. So I have that imaginary line above the height of the tank, and I'll try to, if I can, get it in a worse scenario even would be okay too, because usually the tail of the plane will sit down and they're therefore picking that up. But it should be on the inside of the fuselage. I've seen guys put the Uniflow out here, and I don't know, they never seem to get the motor run right. This I know was years ago. I tried. I even put check valves, one-way RC check valves. It was always a problem though. This is by far the better of the two systems. Having this vent out the top, the one coming out the bottom. If you plan on doing a lot of vent switching, you can always bend that into the airstream. Again, that's not a real critical thing. What's critical is to get this vent up above. Then even if you cap this off or run pipe pressure, muffler pressure, any combination of things, it's real easy to do. It's not a big deal. But once you have these vents down here, and if this starts siphoning into a pipe or into a muffler, no way. Also, another thing years ago, let's pretend my ships all had plywood in the nose, but even if you didn't have it, this is the plywood. This is balsa, and then it's got a coating of fiberglass, so it's a relatively nice sandwich. But I would take a vent, drill a hole through here, and again, you can burn it through with a Dremel tool a lot better than drilling it. It'll make a nicer hole. In the past, I've done this. And what's happened is, in time, these loosen up, and it's really a problem. So what I've done is I've gotten little brass eyelets that put a lip, and I'll show this on the close-up when I actually make the venting. This is a real bulletproof. If you can't find these eyelets locally, I'll be glad to send anybody half a dozen of them or so, since I buy these in quantity. And this tends to, if I put a solder joint here, now I've got a real solid, and epoxy this in. Once this is, the part would look something similar to this by the time it's installed. Once this is in the fuselage, and this is silver soldered, the part that goes by the wood I try to roughen up a little bit so it even gets a better bite on the epoxy. And I remember several people, including myself, of course, that you get a beautiful plane, and the day before the Nats, this would loosen up. And now you're going crazy. Every time you go to take the fuel tubing off, it's now oil gets in there, and if it isn't, you try to fix it by putting a drop of CA, and it never hardens. So if you do this right, and this is sealed with epoxy, this is the best way I know of. And I'll show that on a close-up when I actually lay out the tank venting here. All good tips. I hope these help you get a reliable tank run. Really, not funny really, but a story that years ago I was making a crutch for somebody, and they decided for some reason, I don't know why, they were going to eliminate the aluminum pads. And I tried to convince them that you absolutely should have these to keep the integrity of the nose. And I got this big dissertation about no good, no good, no good, no good. Well, after about, not even, 5 or 6 times of putting the motor in, one side had tightened more than the other. Everything had gotten soft and spongy. And then we tried to retrofit the pads. Well, by then the mounts are crooked. So it's really the worst of all worlds. Put the pads in when you build a plane. It'll always be, no matter what technology you subscribe to. Now I'm doing is cleaning off the paint, because when I get this, the next step on this is going to be to fit in the motor and the pipe and everything after I get the vents in, and I don't want to have the motor even off by the thickness of the paint.
even though you think it'll crush and get out of the way. I've tried real hard all through the construction to maintain the integrity of the nose. Such an important thing. Everything in here is as straight and as solid as I can make it. And again, the hope is that we're going to get years and years, like the Red Baron and like Tradition and like these planes that are all over the world now, look solid, hopefully, long-lasting, vibration-free. The Overflow Vent, if I can, right in this corner here. Now I need to get a pin in here and mark a pinhole so that I can come out this side and see exactly where that hole is going to wind up. Obviously, and it looks like I've guessed that. It's just bare luck that it won't run into the manifold. I need to get it that it's not going to run into the manifold if possible. But a good way to spot that is with a pin. Just get a sharp pin and push it through there. Okay, that pin now spots us. And I want to get it just a little bit up off the manifold so it'll be easy to get. Look at this. Just cut himself with the pin. Bleeding on my Spitfire. I want to get that hole just a little bit up off the manifold so it's easier to get the tubing on. I drill a hole rather than using a drill. This little gizmo, little taper, will put a much smoother finish on it and not run the risk that it'll grab and tear a big chunk of paint out on you either. I scraped away a little bit of the paint here just to get ready to get some epoxy in it. Well, I gotta make the tank fence up yet. Still ahead of myself already. The little bender, and this comes from Harry Higley. You can bend wire, you can bend tubing nicely with this, and a couple of these little, they're just ordinary brass eyelets, and some Stay-Bright silver solder. Those are the parts we'll need. Now all you do is put the tubing in here and you can really get actually it's better to get it in a vise. I ought to put it in a vise. I want to get a 90-degree bend here, and then I want to make sure that when it's looking in the airplane, it isn't tilted down, up, one way or the other. Again, leaving a little bit oversized to begin with. I don't want to go past 90 degrees because I don't want to put it down. If you bend more than 90 degrees, just bend another piece. Don't bend it back and forth, back and forth. Okay, it is important too, I like to deburr and get a nice smooth radius. Otherwise, you tend to put a cut or a slit in the tubing. See if I can get through the day without bleeding all over my model here. Okay, can you imagine? Man died of sticking himself with a pin. And even though a tank fence may seem like a little insignificant, just glue on, add-on thing, they are, in the life of a model, if they're unreliable, they could just make you crazy. Now, because this vent is right underneath the manifold, I wanted to put a ferrule on this. Now normally I don't even put that piece on there, but for right now, what I'm going to do is solder this piece on. I'm going to do this a little differently. Sometimes you have to be a little creative here, because I want this to stick out. Normally I would have it real close, but because it's underneath one of the exhaust pipes, I want to have it out just a little bit further. So what I'm going to do is put this on in the reverse way, and then once this is in the plane, I'll put another eyelet on this side of it. A little variation of how I've done this in the past, but I think this will work real well. I'm going to just gauge this exactly how far out and just put, again, Stay-Bright silver solder on everything. Another thing too, years ago I used to polish this with Gorhams and get this all polished. You put the tubing on, and if there's a little back pressure, the tubing would jump off, fuel would go all over the plane. Something I like not to happen, so I put some 600 sandpaper and just put a little bit of a rough edge on that, just a bit. Now, like anything else on the whole model, Stay-Bright silver solder is my first choice for any of these soldering operations. Always be sure to deflux it with baking soda and water.
Now, one of the things, I have to tell you a funny story. Years ago, I had this plane that ultimately became the '85 Concourse winner, and in a haste to get to the field, I glued the tank vents in a real hurry. Never checked to see if I had gotten any epoxy into the vent. Got to the field and spent about 2 hours being lambasted by Big Jim and by virtually everybody that was out there. Don't you check this stuff? So now I'm real careful about checking it. They cured me of my own silliness anyway. Anyway, the trick is to get a nice bond in here. Not get it oozing out all over the place. We'll see how this system. Now, the trick is don't get any more on there. Oh yeah, beautiful. It's all over the place. Now, once that inside, I have an eyelet pressed on, and I'll just epoxy that eyelet on. Now, what I can do is, after this dries, I'll take some carbon fiber chop and mix it in with epoxy and make a little fillet here. Once I see where the tank is going to ultimately wind up in this whole program. And so I want to get some of that epoxy in there. Okay. Now this will actually press it right into position. It'll kind of hold it. The next step is to locate, and I put extra plywood up in here. I want to get as practical with the spot. It doesn't interfere with the pipe going in and out. And I need to just basically repeat the same thing, a vent, and have it pointing straight down. Or in this case, I can have it pointing. See, I don't know if I want to do that. No, I'll have it pointing down, play it safe. I was going to try to make two of them. I don't want to interfere with the clearance in there at all. Now, believe me, all little bends in this really took a lot of time. And what I didn't want to have happen is have it come right out in the middle of the shark's tooth. Luckily, after making about 30 of these, well, I managed to get it to come out right inside where it will not interfere, hopefully, with the pipe tunnel. And that'll then be, and I had to solder that washer on an angle and maintain this at a nice straight angle. Not as easy as it looked, but it's going to be a replicate of that vent. And I'm just looking to make sure I haven't left every once in a while. You're all done, and I say, what didn't I think of that? The more times you can look at something, it seems like you always can make a little progress. I'm getting some epoxy mixed. Get this vent in and let it dry before we go to the next step. Oh, well, the tank vents are drying. Let's take a little peek out here and see how our pond is coming out. Looks like we're in the first couple of days of spring here. The water's still green. You still can't see the fish. But it doesn't matter. I know they're in there. When I was in there cleaning it out, some of those suckers were moving around and jumping and bumping into my boots and stuff. Anyway, we've come up on one of the most fun parts of any model. And what it is, I'm going to try to fit up the powertrain today. This is really, well, every year I wait for this day. It's kind of exciting. I get all my bits and pieces out, and in my case, that's a significant amount of junk. I have the Jet 60 from George. We've run it in on other videos. Extra screws, pads, mounts, gaskets. The box that usually accompanies having any tune pipe engine with spares. And all our carbon fiber spinners that we made years ago. All our tricked out props. All our junk. Things that I don't remember I had from years ago. But with all this hardware, didn't think of it. Our spare landing gear sets. We've got 6-7 extra sets of landing gear, and the wheels wear out at Muncie so quickly. Anyway, the vents dried up real nice. This was one of the nicest things right here. Now be sure you can move the whole plane, make sure the vents are good and solid. That venting system has worked real well in the past. And I'm going to have Rudy Midgley make me up a custom tank, but for the purposes right now of fitting it, I can fit any 5.5, 6 ounce tank in here is fine.
Now, even though this tank will probably be replaced when I get the tank from Woody, what I do is I start off with, this is a brand new all-tube forward tank. When I get the other tank, this one then becomes the spare tank for that airplane. So in this way, I always have a spare. And this one by then should have a couple of gallons of fuel on it. Notice what I'm doing, real important, deburr those edges. This takes a few minutes. I also like to put what amounts to be threads on them, so that try to keep the tubing from sliding off if at all possible. Little detailed things, but if you miss one of these, even one of these, and these tubes come off, oh.
First little problem I ran into is with a full 6 ounce tank, one of the problems becomes that the way these vents worked out, if I need the lowest setting, and it's very unlikely that I will, what I'll need to do then is replace one of these vents. So when I have Woody make up the tank that really will be in here, by the time we compete, I'll have these vents moved so that they're in a little more convenient position. But for just getting everything ballparked in and try to get a balance point on the plane and a total weight, just a rough out was what we're doing here. This is not the final thing. We're going to fly that engine in Strega for a couple of gallons, get it all dialed in with props and stuff before we even put it in here. But to get this part of the job done, I need to know that now when I make the real, let's call it the real tank, I need my overflow vent to be further out over there. Doing a real quick fit up here, I realized I'm going to need to trim these vents down quite a bit, but I don't want to shorten them too much. Again, I'll deburr, see the razor edge and everything, I'll deburr everything off. And now I know when I have Woody make the tank and the vents are in the right position, this is only going to wind up being a spare tank anyway, but you sure wouldn't want to go to the Nats and have no spare tank. Well, you put a tank in and all the vents hit the motor and you're right out at the field and it's a problem. So for a spare tank, this is certainly an adequate way to do it. If I was going to make a tank, now this would be a permanent tank, I'd have all the vents moved into the right position. Now, even though I know what the shim is on other planes, each plane seems to be a little different, and I always want to allow myself that at least one of the shims is 16th plywood, so that I can pull that shim out. And believe me, it's important to get the tank in nice and tight. Now, how nicely engineered that is. Anyway, what I'll do now is make up a bunch of, now this is a 1/4 inch, so I want to make an 1/8 and 2/16. Then I have some variation. I can put 16ths on the top, the bottom, back and forth. The biggest of the balsa shims, once I know exactly what it needs to be shimmed, I can make one big shim out of balsa, and that'll take care of that. But for right now, I need to get a couple of 1/8 and at least 1/4 inch, just to get a ballpark reading where this airframe is going to shim out. Okay, now, another thing that I always like to do is I want to give these shims, before I put them in on a half permanent basis, give them a good coat of carnauba wax. It serves two purposes. I also want to make them smooth so that they slide in and out, because I want to pack the tank as tightly as possible. Therefore, then it becomes a vibration absorption part rather than just something riding around and shaking around there and making a milkshake. So the same wax that we use on molds, the carnauba wax part oil, is an excellent wax. I'm going to go get one coat on each one of these, and then I can kind of set this up on a half permanent basis and then start fitting the motor. I try to go about this in a methodical way. So each part, in other words, I work from the tank to the motor and then back to the pipe. If you just start fitting things randomly, I don't know. This way seems to work pretty well for me. Again, it's a mold wax, but it's really just a raw carnauba wax. And you don't want to use pledge or something. And even little details like this, being able, when you really pack the tank shims, I know from time to time you can't get the tank shim out, so I leave this little tongue on that I can get in there. I don't want to mention any names, but we were at the Nats one year, and
experienced flyer got so frustrated he couldn't get his tank out. They had wires and car jacks and he left it to Dave Midgley to take the tank out, and Dave went over and put the tank out. But Dave, I know you're a hero. Anyway, that's a true story. I also just put a little bit of wax, just so that these parts slide in and out. Even though this tank, I haven't even cleaned this tank yet, so. But I do want to get a rough fit up. And just like when you do construction work of any kind, you want to get a rough idea if you're in the ballpark. I know I have to change the mounting holes on the jet, but I don't know by how much. And I want that motor to fit into Strager and be interchangeable. And we're going to run it probably in the little Cardinal, the purple Cardinal, just to get some runtime and some prop testing. I got props coming from several sources, and because it's an all-new package, I want to videotape it so I can share this information with some of the other people that have already, I'm sure George has already sold more of those motors. Anyway, now this will have a real good shot at sliding in without tearing everything up. I want to make sure that tank is really in there, that shim is packed in there. Now I can basically start to fit up the engine and the header and the pipe. So I need to assemble that whole thing into a unit so I can see where these mounting holes are going to wind up. Now see, I didn't build this crutch around a Jet 60 since it just came out now. These are Super Tiger 60 holes, so I'm going to do the same thing I did in Stragers, make plates, and that'll give me an infinite variety of motor options to put in here. You can see it's a good idea. It's what Joe Adamusco has done on his Spitfire, is be able to switch from a Tiger 60 to a PA to a Jet, any combination of motors. The thing you never want to do is make a plane where the mounts are so close together that you can't fit a larger engine. It's real easy to fit a smaller engine between wider bearers, but very hard to put a big engine or a wide case in where the mounts are too close together. So if in doubt, leave the mounts a little further apart. Now I need to have the spinner back plate on so I can get my front to back clearance, get an idea where I stand. Now it looks like, boy, how inconvenient is this? It looks like the width is exactly a Super Tiger 60. Wow, that's close. And the back ones, I may be able to just cut in through the back a little bit. This looks like it's not going to be as difficult. I don't know why. Maybe these have different mounting holes than the 50. It looks just a bit different. Well, that's how much I had to move. This hole I just opened up a little bit, and these you can get from the back. So whatever these mounting holes are, at least we'll have two choices now. This will be the same mounts as a Tiger 60. Very easy to interpret that. So what I need to do now, because I'm going to use clamps on top of this, and I have this little tool. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, or we have one side for Tiger 46s, one side for 60s. So then what I do, I make 3 sets up at a time. Then I'll take one set and cut the ends off, and that'll be actually my little clamp piece. Nice little tool. Joe K made that up years ago for drilling out motor mount pads. Now, it's always a good idea when drilling 60, 61, or 20, 24, either one of the aluminum. Use a little bit of oil. In this case, WD-40 is fine. Let the chip clear. Again, just basic machine shop. Nothing special. Don't drill it all in one shot. It will really prolong the life of the drill. Give a nice clean cut. Want to countersink the edges just a little bit so there's no razor sharp line. Now it's nice and accurate to do it this way. And we may have to set up a set of these to do the jets. I don't know yet. But these certainly, as opposed to drilling them by hand, no contest. If you have somebody, a friend that's in the machine shop business, or you can justify having somebody make a tool up, well, you can just buy the pads with the holes in them. Nice tool. This is absolute perfect for what we're using it for. Use this for about 12 years now. So I want to take and just break the edge with anything, even a bigger size drill. just to break that edge so you have a nice clean. Now, I'm going to look at how this is going to fit. I'm sure I'm going to have to cut both ends off, and then I'm going to have to radius to get in by the transfer ports. It's going to require a little more because these are actually made to go under the motor, not on top. So there'll be a little dremeling or filing or something here by the time I'm done. Now I took a measurement. I hope I'm going to get this right without having to make 2,000 pieces. A fine-tooth hacksaw blade does a real nice cutting job. Don't press down too hard. Let the tooth do the cutting. The more you press, probably the worse the final cut will be. To make the relief, if any, for the transfer ports.
The way this worked out, I didn't realize it would, because Strager's fuselage is much more narrow, and I had to file and cut and everything. On this side, what's really nice here is, and it's almost like it's made, if I just use the short side up against the motor, there's enough room because the fuselage is wider here. So it's not a problem, and now I've just sandwiched these between two hardened aluminum plates. The only penalty is the weight of the plates, which is just 2 grams each. And that looks like that's really going to settle that. The clearance here is just about right. Got a real easy choke thing going on. And having seen some of the differences in venting, I know people that have put holes in things here have wound up having a Scotch tape over them, so I'm hoping this venting thing is going to work. If it isn't, this guy's going to have a bigger and meaner mouth by the time the season is over. Anyway, that part of it worked real nice. The next thing is to pull the motor out and fit up the header, and usually I have to cut into the tank shim or whatever. I have a special 2-inch header that came from George Aldrich, made just for this plane, and I have 2 of them. Anything you buy that's a custom part, always have 2 of them, just in case. Well, in fitting up everything, what I realized is the full 6-ounce tank was hitting on the header, so what I did, I just replaced it with one of my spare tanks for now, and it looks like I'll either have to make a tank with a little dent in it for this particular plane, or I'll just use a 5.5-ounce tank to get through whatever the solution to this problem is. And the reason is, the way the header is bent, it just touches as it does commonly with these, and I can get either Woody to make a special tank if I have to, or again, just use the smaller of the 2, but because of fitting it up, this was a good way to just get a test fit today. Best laid plans of mice and men. I also noticed another thing in laying this all out is I'm probably going to have to take a little bit of material off around here because it's such a tight fit getting the pipe in and out that I put a crack in the paint, and I'm probably going to have to take a little piece out of here. Again, I want to have clearance, and I want to, if at all possible, be able to just pull this right out the front. That was my goal right in the very beginning, and it looks like there's several constraints on doing it here if I want to use the biggest diameter pipe. So I'm trying to fit everything to the biggest diameter and the highest rise of the headers at the same time. I want to emphasize I'm always very careful of being able to interchange parts, because the ultimate goal here is to be able to take both motors to the field, both planes to the field, and interchange motors into planes and whatever. Now, one of the things that the original problem that I had here, I've solved with the 2 headers. I needed the high-rise header in Strager, so as long as I was going to take the header off and replace it, I wanted to make sure both motors were interchangeable. See, they have different mount reliefs here, and it's hard to explain, but I wanted to make sure that both motors fit in both planes without having a major problem. Now, the 50, the holes are a little bit different. I don't even know. I guess the Venturis, sure, the Venturis are interchangeable. The heads look different. The heads look totally different. I haven't had the head off yet. But this is just one of the things, is when we actually get some decent flying weather, which, believe me, I hope we're going to get some this weekend, I want to get an extra one of the low headers, an extra one of the high headers, so I have extras of everything when I get to the field that I can switch and mix and match and whatever. And I'm making sure that all of the pipes fit in all of the planes. And again, Strega, we had a lot of trouble with angles on the pipes and everything. So by having all of this hardware and knowing that each thing is going to interchange, what I'll ultimately be able to do is get Strega set up with the header that I should have had months ago, and that would allow the pipe to sit down into the body. And the other header that I can use either in the Cardinal or in the Spitfire. I don't know which I'm going to need when I do the Cardinal or the Spitfire with a final setup. I don't know which one I'm going to need. So obviously the answer is to have a couple of each. And you can see the difference in the finning on the motor. It's just, there's a strap around the case here. I assume that's where the rod rides in because it's a larger motor. And I guess the weight is so close that it doesn't even pay to put them on a scale. They feel exactly the same. In fact, there may be a little difference one way or another. For today, that's all I'm going to get done. We're going to come back here tomorrow and try to get the motors interchangeable, get Strega set up again, and most of all, get some flying weather coming up soon. Boy, I hope so. And the goal here is to get, again, ultimately, that this plane, I can put either one of the two jet motors in interchangeably. That's hopefully going to be the goal. That I can someday get down to the field with both Strega and this model and switch 50 to 60, 60 to 50 if there's any dramatic advantage. And of course, as the final thing, the absolute final thing, have both motors and both sets of headers and pipes ready to drop in this, and have all the choices. So I've been really fussing around to try to make it that I can do this all very conveniently. Now I'm back today, and boy oh boy, I've been giving this a lot of thought. And again, this is always the way I go about doing things. Nothing scientific here. After thinking about this last night, I have a 5-ounce tank, a 6-ounce tank, and a 5.5-ounce tank. The 6-ounce tank, the biggest one, when it's in the fully up-shimmed position, and again, this is the kind of stuff I don't want to wait until I get to the field to do. By the way, Joe Adamusco called me early this morning, and he's ready to test fly the Spitfire Sunday, so we're only 2 days away from flying that Spitfire. Anyway, what I wanted to show is I needed to make a little detent in here, a little clearance piece, when I use this header and the 60. And again, remember what I'm trying to do is get use of all the options here. Let me see. It's going to fit one tank. Now I could say, when I have the 5-ounce tank, of course this is further back. But it's always important, and I kept thinking about this last night, I want to get that tank as close up to the motor as possible. This will allow me to do it, of course. Now I just need to get a little piece of fuel tank tin and solder it into that, making that little rip. Now M600 is another good product for, I'll just flush this tank out a little bit. Once I solder this on, and of course I'll re-clean it out by flushing at least a gallon of fuel through it. While I have a big opening, I can look in there and see if there's any soldering chips or anything in there I want to get out. This is kind of standard that the pipe people do to get a little bit of clearance in the front of the tank. Because of course it's always the best you can ever get is when the tank is right up on the motor. The further back it is, it's always less and less good. I've been trying to make a little pattern for this little lip out of, well, it's going to take a little bit of back and forth to get this exactly the right shape. This is the kind of thing that, well, really you can make a paper pattern and everything, but I'm just making a couple of these up until I get one that fits the way I want. Then I'll solder it in with Stay Bright. There's really no quick way I know to do this. Other than just keep making stuff up. I'm trying to get as tight a fit as I can on here. Just a little bit time consuming to get this piece to fit the way I want it to. to get that corner down. Now what I do is, and I've been trying to invent this as I go along, is I press this into a wooden hammer that's in a vise just to hold it in while I tack solder it. So that's tacked. Now I can go around here with Stay Bright and tack this piece in.
Again, that's kind of, in fact, I don't even need this anymore. That's the hardest part of this job, is figuring out how you can get, well, we don't know that it's done yet, so let's not get too cute about it. And making tanks is one of the part of this. I don't really care to do. Now when we're done with this, obviously we're going to clean it very well, extremely well. Then flush about a gallon of fuel through until we see that we have no more contamination in here. You want to make sure anytime you use Stay Bright Silver Solder that you deflux with baking soda, in this case baking soda and water, all inside the tank. Now that I have it tacked in place, I can kind of walk the soldering iron around and let it just flow in. Expert solderer that I am. Believe me, this is not one of my favorite parts of modeling. I don't know if you can see that. Once that side dries, now I'll try to do the same thing on this side, is just let it start at one side, let it flow right in. Clean that joint up now. We're ready to flush the tank out. Okay, what I did, I took a little bit of alcohol first. Ran some alcohol into here. Shook it up. Then I took a little bit of baking soda and water, about a spoonful, ran that through. And now the last step is to take some fuel and a clean paper towel or a clean rag, and once the tank is draining nice and clean, and again we can tell that right away, I can just look at what's coming out against the sink. If I see any, oh yeah, little stuff coming out. Oops, some more. See, I'm letting it go. Let's see if I can show this better. All the stuff is going to wind up down at the bottom here, hopefully. Right down at the bottom. So what I'm doing is, and the last thing, once it's clean, is to check it for leaks. There goes another piece out. And this will all wind up in a filter eventually, so this is really a cheap investment when it comes down to it. Let it sit for a second. Boy, this beats the heck out of going to the flying field, having the first day, the first flight of the day, you get this tremendous lean run. Now, it would be even better if this would fit into the plane that we're going to use it in, because then what it would allow me to do is I could get some runs on it before it actually goes into the Spitfire. And that's what I'll try to do, is when I fit this up in the other plane, see if I can make that happen. Again, I'm trying to be real careful to make sure I have all of the hardware fitting in all the planes. And it's really, you wouldn't believe how many people wind up, they get to the gnats, let's say a typical example. You get to the gnats, and you need to borrow somebody's engine, and you go to put it in the plane, and your lugs are different than their lugs, or something's totally different, and you really say, oh boy, the stuff's really coming out of here now. So again, you need to do this probably for a whole gallon of fuel or half a gallon, whatever. I'm kind of fussy about this part of it, and I'm willing to pay the price now, because once I get to the flying field, I'd like to have you know, especially here where we get this limited amount of good weather. I don't want to waste one of those days pulling a tank out of the plane and you're at the field and bumblebees are flying in your nose and stuff and you're hot. Under shop conditions here, it's just a little bit easier to do this kind of maintenance. And again, one of my biggest philosophies or biggest ideas that I've found that works for virtually everybody is do as much of the maintenance as you can at home. Now what I'm doing, I'm pressurizing the tank to make sure we don't have a leak here somewhere. I got my fingers over the vent, I'm holding pressure. Ooh, that's really good. Okay. Then the last thing, I'll put it under water and pump air into it and see if I get any air bubbles. Usually this will do it though. And again, a little patience here. This is just time consuming. Nothing expensive going on here. We use a couple dollars worth of fuel at worst. As soon as I see it's running out really perfectly clear, you can lay a clear paper towel in there if you don't have a clean sink. I did this one time and I forgot that I had done this in the sink, and Karen came home and threw some laundry in here, and of course it all got soaked. She was pre-soaking one of her good pieces of clothing. I don't have to worry. I don't have any good pieces of clothing, so it's not really a big factor. Anyway, and that, I hope, is going to get us that we're ready to go to the field. Now, the last thing is with the sink. Totally filled with water. I guess I don't want to fill the whole thing. I have the tank underwater, and I'm just putting air in to see if I have any leaks. An air pressure test. And with this kind of a test, as soon as you put any pressure at all on, you can feel the tank bubbles. You can see it's floating. Looks like we've lucked out, and I never say anything but luck when you solder up a tank. Well, I guess we're ready to take this to the flying field. Whoa! I keep saying the last test. The last and final thing that I like to see is I get a brand new paper towel, and I'm going to run about one more tank full through here, out onto the clear paper towel, and see what comes out with the pickup facing down. Again, by looking at the paper towel, I'm moving it around. If I can see any junk at all come out of here. It's amazing. Anytime you touch a soldering iron to a tank, it's a nightmare. You always have something a week later. Okay, that looks like it's coming out real clean now. And those are the famous last words. That would be even more, but I don't know if this is going to fit in that Cardinal. I think that the tank in that Cardinal is glued in. I'm not sure because that plane's been crashed already. But one of the things that this will allow me to do is if I could get some runs on this, the vibration of the motor running usually loosens up even more junk. You don't know how many people I've seen get to the field, and it's the best day of the year, and they're sitting there cleaning the tank and cleaning filters, and I'm one of them. Okay. Time well spent, cheap insurance, and now we have the 5-ounce tank and a 6-ounce tank and a 5.5. The two little tanks don't need this, but in case I need more fuel capacity, I can do it right at the field.
And obviously that header is red hot, so you want to have some air clearance there. We have a little clearance, even if we need to shim the tank up even more. We have some clearance in there. Okay, that was a good job. I think that's going to work out well. Adjustment I needed to make to get the pipe to sit exactly the way I wanted and get the exit to come out even. I had to lower the pipe mount, so it's no big deal. Just cut that piece out, make up a new mount, and this way I have an infinite adjustment. Before, with the pipe all the way down, what happened when I put the pipe in, it split the fuselage, which really didn't make me too happy. So by lowering that, I'll give myself a little more clearance up there. Left is I put another coat of thin CA on that, and then put a little touch-up paint on, and then decide what I'm going to do about this this interference fit. It's really not a giant problem. I may be able to just put a little notch in there, or haven't figured that out yet. That's one of those things I need. If you've never set up one of these pipe setups, there's a lot of little clearance things that have to be taken into account. In this plane, because I'm trying to bury as much of the pipe as possible and keep the vertical CG down. See, that's what the major part of this problem is that I'm real concerned about keeping that down.
Now, I've just been taking just a little bit of clearance away from this. Again, because I want to be able to fit all the pipes that I've made, all the various headers, all the motors. And actually, the truth is, I should have done this. I should have had the 60 in my possession and that extra header, and it would have made this job a little easier, but it's no problem. Now, what I'm going to do is right on the edge here, seal it with some thin CA, and then, of course, run a little bead of touch-up paint down there. Usually, by the time the plane has 50 or 100 flights on it, this part of the model gets all chewed up anyway. Actually, if in the future I wanted to, I could make a little, like a reverse scoop here. I guess that's one of the choices I'll ultimately have if I want to do that. But fitting one of these guys up, there's always a lot of little compromises you have to make. It really, when you see one that's all done, you think, oh, that's easy, yeah. Then you go to do it, and there's 900 little things that have to be addressed. It's always good if you can put the thin CA on the end of a Q-tip. So do a good job of sealing this raw wood up. And we'll be able to get a little, just get a striping brush and put a little bead of paint on that. After 2 or 3 coats of thin CA, just dust sand it with some 1200. And put a coat of Rodak dope right out of the can. No thinner. That's why I'll cover in one coat. Finally, it's embarrassing to tell you how long this took. I have this set up with all the possibilities, and the objective of all of this is that ultimately you can take the whole package out in one piece, and it's a little tight up around the nose, but it comes out. And that was the objective of everything we've done here. Well, the last thing I wanted to do here on this ship, I wanted to touch up the little spots where the paint was buffed through and get an extra coat of clear on these. Needless to say, just tin foiled it all out. I should be able to just get a little bit of spray paint on there. And once that dries, we'll be ready to go on to the next step. Now that Brodak clear really lays out very, very nice. You can see how nice that's laid out. That probably won't even need to be buffed when it's dry. But while this is drying now, I have about an hour left here. One of the things I want to do, every year I go through what I call my tune pipe parts. I dump them all on the floor, take a little inventory, see what I need more of, what I need less of. There's virtually no way I know of that you can get involved in this level of activity and not have some kind of a parts box. And I tried to make this out of postal boxes years ago just to segregate out the spare pipes, the spare headers. It's a good time to organize that, get it all squared away, get the box for the props all squared away,
And I think this weekend we're going to be meeting Joe Adamusco down there for a flying session with his new Spitfire, so hope you'll be on board for that.
I wanted to make, again, remember what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to make it that both of the engines fit in all the places. Now, we know the 50 fits in here, it's no problem at all. Here's the only other problem that we wind up having here. There's a little strap on the 60. If you can see this is the 60, and I have to make a little clearance for that. The cases are basically made from the same case, but they have that little extra material, and I assume, without taking the motor apart, that's for rod clearance for the larger motor. But I need to cut two little notches right in here so that I'll be able, again, now the nice thing about doing it this way is we know how this model performed with all of the numbers, all of the notes that we have for the 50, and we'll get a real accurate comparison of the 50 to the 60, and I can go back through my notes, pipe lengths, venturis, all of that will be relative numbers. So, and I may even get to fly this Sunday with Joe. I don't know because we're running out of time here and is trying to catch up from this trip to England. But other than that little notch, that's going to be the only change that I think is going to be necessary to mount this right in. Uh-oh, there's President Nixon back from England.
Everybody knows how much I've fooled with getting motors that the planes aren't made for these motors to begin with. Now, here's a good trick, and possibly you can use it in your own program here, is the motor still isn't sitting down on the mounts. So what I want to do is I want to rock it back and forth, and what it'll do, the aluminum will leave a little hard spot on the mounts or on the soft wood or the hardwood, as the case may be. But this will just pick up a spot, and I can see the spot that I'm hitting hard right here. Then, of course, all I need to do, notice I have all the tank vents blocked off, screws and bolts. This way you're never married to one motor, one way or another. And I always like to be able to, hey, who knows that we're not going to come out with a Jet 65 or a Jet 75 and they'll change the rules. Who knows? Okay, now this is going to pick up another hard spot now. Ooh, right there. Okay. And by doing it this way, you don't take off material that you don't have to. Uh-oh, President Nixon knows I'm back from England. Now, one of the things that came out of this little test program that I thought was significant, and it's helped me be able to put different motors in different planes real conveniently, is this clamping system. And it's not a big unique thing. It's not even a high-tech thing. It's nothing. But what it does, it just allows you, without butchering up the motor so badly. Boy, if you ever see some of the Super Tiger 60s years ago, they had holes you could put a donut through. Anyway, what I want to do is, I just want to get the offset in there. This allows me to get a variety of offsets also. And notice, this is the high header, the 2-inch header. Now, one of the things this will allow me to do is kind of pre-tune the pipe, since I want to use all the hardware that'll ultimately go into Spitfire. I can get it tuned, I can work on props. I have a lot of little things I can do while it's in this airplane. Plus I can just get friendly with it, get used to the characteristics of starting and running and what glow plugs are going to work. We're going to try to get a lot of fuel through it in a relative short amount of time here if we can, starting Sunday. And I'll even try to get Joe to be the test pilot for some of it. Joe, of course, is ready to fly his Spitfire. Probably on the next tape, you're going to see that Spitfire fly. Well, we've got everything in it, the pipe, the header, a little grinding to the mounts. Now just think of it, this is a plane that was made in 1993. 6-7-year-old plane. Been flown by, I don't know how many people, many people. Been crashed. had the wings ripped off, had Super Tiger 60s, Jet 50s, and now we've added to that the Jet 60. Now what I want to do, I want to run a couple of tanks of fuel through this. The reason is I don't want to go out to the field just totally cold, not having the needle valve set. And I also want to see if I'm close. Now I have the prop from the 50, which seemed to be a little bit of a high load for the 50, so I'm expecting it'll be a light load for this. I have a brand new George Aldrich pipe that's never even been run. The 2-inch rise header, 280 Venturi with a spigot, all things you can get, virtually everything, including the prop, is a package you can get in one piece or in parts from George Aldrich. I just gotta wait. I'm gonna get the fuel can out here. I really do want to get a couple of runs. Maybe I get 2 or 3 runs on this. One of the things that's significantly different about this engine than the 50, this has a totally different feel in the bump.
The 50 felt a lot tighter at the top. This feels a little bit looser. Yeah, we're going to find out here. One way or another. Chokes.
A couple of real neat things. First off, the motor is like the king of the 2/4 brake. It really comes on and shuts off right to the end of the fuel tank, number one. Number two, you can, I don't know, we're going to have to fly it to find out. Prop load seems real close. This looks like we're going to be in the ballpark here with the prop. What else? Power Master fuel, you can see all the oil in the back of the pipe. You know you're not getting cheated on the oil. And this setup, what I'm suggesting you can do is with this setup, you can pretty much just replicate everything that I have right here. This engine doesn't have any of that hard bump at the top. Again, we're going to have to get out to the field. Boy, I'll tell you. Seems like it's going to be a real nice summer to be working with this motor. And in the new Spitfire, too. What's the motto? Never throw away your old planes. Give them to Wendy. Leaving at that, the pond is getting filled. Another couple of days, we just aerate the water going into it. We're going to get shrubs this weekend. I don't know. We have a choice of going to the profile contest or going to fly Joe's new Spitfire. Take a wild guess. We're going to miss the profile contest. He's home just in time. I'm hungry. Hungry, hungry, hungry. We just started using the barbecue. I can taste those hamburgers now. The only thing left now is to get some flying weather, and unfortunately today is not it, so we'll be picking this up as soon as we can get some flying weather. We'll get together with Joe. I love most of all, since we've been back from England, every day we come out and check out our garden, of course, and my lovely wife makes me a spot of tea. Now, all you people in England, I really enjoyed sharing the trip with you, but I gotta tell you, this is the American-English combination. Pizza and tea for lunch. Every day, too.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It's like being in the Garden of Eden here. Thing of the day, I got the first part out of this Gary Hayjack mold. And you can see it's got some molding flaws, some bubbles in the resin. I got the resin too hot here is what's happened. And we'll basically just make up another mold, make up another part. Even though if you wanted to use this, it'd be no trouble using this at all. Well, you could obviously just sand these out if you were really looking to use every part, but not to worry. We have enough of them. Just add it to our list of junk. Anyway, hope you've really enjoyed this video. Hey, hope you pick up some clues, get some ideas. And if you do, give me some clues. I need clues. Really love having tea with Karen out there every day since we're back from England. Love walking around, hugging and kissing my Air Force before I go to bed at night. And boy, I love my Spitfire. We are going out this weekend with Adamusco's Spitfire and PA-61. I hope we're going to have some fun. Anyway, we'll see you on the next tape. And if you enjoy the tapes, please share them. Pass them around. Make sure everybody enjoys the hobby. Bring some new people in. Get people that are in the hobby already more active. Get them to build something.
Indeed, ready.
I've just been told supper's ready. Best time of the day. See you again on the next tape. Well, we have a couple minutes left on the end of this tape, and I just thought I'd share the pictures that we took from our trip to England. Obviously, you can notice the Lancaster in the back. That is the Dam Busters plane. This is in Duxford, the main hangar in Duxford, and here's the Vulcan. You see the Vulcan there. Pretty impressive. Again, we got quite a few pictures of, I'm trying to remember, there's 7 or 8 different Spitfires in the Duxford collection. I want to go through these. I'll take out all the personal ones. Some of these are commingled in with the ones from the day we spent with Roger Ladd. And I don't have them separated yet, but they're basically all Spitfires. This was one of the models Joe was anticipating, or maybe he even used it with a blue coloring. And that, of course, is Roger Ladd, the F2B judge from England. I'm trying to sort through these. There's a lot of them like this where the lighting was not good because we were on kind of a secret tour here. But it doesn't really matter. I think you get the picture. Here's all of us. Karen snapped a picture with our personal tour guide and Roger. And we just went, in the time we were in England, we went to 4 or 5 different museums, all of which, of course, have flyable or totally restored Spitfires. This is only one of them. And, of course, the ones, Lancaster, still in the world, left in totally flyable condition. Here's a picture of the area of England that Roger lives in. It's called the Fen. Plenty of places. This is why they had all the bomber fields out, and this is Lincolnshire. This is in a town named Boston, right where Roger lives, that they have the tallest, they call this, what the heck is it? The Stump. You can see this from miles away. It's on Boston, England. Roger also treated us to a trip to the last working windmill, and I mean, this is totally functional. We even have some video of this once we get Elliot to convert the video over to our US mode. More pictures inside the main hangar. They have the Concorde in there. They have a Sutherland, a short Sutherland. This is a latest model, a 24. Extremely nice condition. We found out later that all of the airplanes in the Duxford collection belong to one person. There's two hangars, where virtually every plane in there belongs to one individual. I mean, just imagine that. And I hope soon we're going to have that video converted over. You'll see some of the video that we took on this trip was just absolutely unbelievable. Now, I got 4 other rolls of pictures that haven't come back yet, and I'll try to spice them in. This is a picture of Roger Ladd's house. And by the way, he built the house himself. Roger was a super host and tour guide. He works in telecom, so they basically scammed the day off. His wife cooked us dinner. Wonderful. We're doing a little night fighting here. I mean, we stayed at the museum till after closing. They were shutting the lights off and throwing us out. But you can get a little idea of just how much fun we had. We went to this place. It's a 400-year-old pub to have, whoops, that's a paper towel, to have a meal. This is in the Battle of Britain Museum where they have a Spitfire. This is one of the famous ones. I have a lot of video in here. I shot about an hour. They had a Focke-Wulf in there. And it was up, you could get up on the second story and really get a look at how it... Okay, check this out for Bandrop. Look at this big, beautiful doll. The real, and this is not an RC model in the back here. That is the airplane. Anyway, now one of the cutest things, Roger, you know how we always like to play jokes on each other, and the meaner the better, of course. When I got in the car, he handed me a steering wheel and he says, "Here, you drive." Which I didn't think was humorous, but he did. And being he was driving, I didn't want to contradict him in any way. Anyway, so many of these. From the other set of pictures we have, and boy, there's a giant set. We took pictures virtually all over England. We were in Bath, we were in Oxford, Cambridge. Elliot Scott really took us, I don't even remember some of these places where they were. We were in William Shakespeare's house. We were in all kinds of cathedrals. St. Paul's, we spent one afternoon in St. Paul's. Just was a wonderful trip. And there's a lot of things like this that just say what the whole trip was like. Obviously, Big Ben, wouldn't want to miss a chance to take a flight. And believe me, they say there's no flying fields in Europe. You can fly right in front of Big Ben here. And the taxi cabs. Boy, the taxi cabs, fantastic. Very unlike the New York cabs. Telephones, the English telephones. We saw one of these, we almost bought one time at an antique show. At Stonehenge, of course, we went to visit. That's what's left of Stonehenge. I think the video that we got there was really marginal because you can see the weather was coming in and it actually hailed on us while we